happening, friends? I'm Nick. I'm Hyperion's Crypto with the clubs, and we are very excited to be announcing our very first tip one, week one of the club's weekly golf tips. So, what we're going to be talking about today is one of the most important, fundamental, foundational pieces before you even take the club back and hit the ball, and that's address. How you set up to the ball. How you set up to the ball can dictate if you're going to hit a good shot, a bad shot, a great shot, and most importantly, it helps you be consistent. And if you're not setting up to the ball regularly in the same way, in a good way, then it's going to be nearly impossible for you to continue your improvement on your golf swing. And the nice thing about setup and talking about setup and adjusting and getting your setup right is it's not necessarily a hardcore grind on the golf swing itself. It's literally just making sure that when you address the ball, pretty much in any way, shape, or form, that you're setting up to it in an appropriate way to give you the best opportunity to hit the best golf shot that you can. Whether or not you're playing on the weekend, in a tournament, trying to take money, any of that. The setup is the best thing that you can focus on in pretty much any event. And the nice thing about setup too is, especially if you're in a pressure situation, sometimes instead of focusing on the golf swing, focusing solely on the setup, it takes away some of the other things so that you can focus in on one thing that you can 100% can control. Sometimes you can't control your golf swing. It's a little out of sorts. It just happens. You obviously can't control the weather. You can't control the lie. You can't control a lot of things, but the setup and address is one of the most important and one of the most controllable things that you can do. So that's sort of the premise there and why address, which I'm sure everybody knows is so important. But the other really nice thing about address is you don't need to be on a range or a golf course to practice it. Let's say you're in your office. Let's say you're at home. Let's say wherever, in public, rep that golf life. So anyway, we should always be practicing the setup. And the idea is setup is going to vary from person to person. Sometimes one's feet are going to be slightly open, slightly shut, they're neutral. The feet are probably one of the few things that can sort of vary as far as fundamental, and it's going to depend on the type of shot, body dynamics, etc. But I would always say that in general, with a golf swing and an address, the more neutral and natural for that matter is probably going to be the most optimal. The reason why we like something neutral is in any golf swing, you doing something in an extreme one way or another, unless it's really natural to you and you have learned to work with it, is generally going to prohibit you from probably being the best that you can. So I'll take a really, really powerful player, amazing golf swing, Tony Finau. Now Tony Finau plays a fade, but if you look at the way that he swings and his dynamics of the golf swing, whether or not it's the club face and how he sets up, it's generally pretty neutral, and he can work the ball both ways. If you go to one extreme or the other, it might limit you to one side, but that's something for down the road. So anyway, we're going to get to the address. So if you're at address, I have a club in my hand. The idea is something very neutral, nothing really stiff, nothing excessive. You don't want the arms extended. It's really just setting up naturally, right? Not too far, not too close. Just kind of how you would, especially if you're an athlete or you're you have sports in you. It's the same way. The golf swing is an athletic move, and same thing with the setup. So you wanna feel neutral. You want the arms to hang naturally, and the grip is another thing, but you want that all to be good feeling. You don't want anything to feel out of sorts or weird. That can, obviously, the caveat to that is, of course, if you're working on something, it's always going to feel a little weird. But anyway, back to the address. So that's what we want to work on. We want to grind on that all the time. And one thing is really important as far as setup is always making sure that your ball position is in the correct spot, because the ball position can mean also so much as well as far as setup. So when you set up to the ball, you want to make sure that you have a consistent ball position. And this is something that I would look at home in the mirror generally speaking, on any iron, you want it on your left neckline if you're a righty, and vice versa if you're a lefty. So if we get excessive, if it gets too far back, don't get misconstrued. Flighting the ball down can have something to do with ball position, but if you look at, for example, Tiger Woods, he moves the ball back a little bit, but his ball position stays the same, and he dictates that through swing mechanics and swing moves. Here's a pro tip. When you're addressing the ball, a big thing is people will often set up to the ball and they will look right of where they're actually aimed. So what happens is you hit a good shot, but you feel like you pulled it, and you go, WTF, I pulled the ball, but I hit it really good. That's probably because, so by first glance, I might look like I'm aimed maybe at the yellow flag, but really where I'm aimed is probably 20-something yards left of that. So when you set up to the ball and you look, what you want to do is, instead of looking straight out, you want to look a little bit left, naturally. Try to see where the club face is pointing. And the club face generally is going to point left of where you think it is. So then, in practice, you can see, okay, how is this club face looking? Wow, the club face is pointed left of where I think. So you would want to get into the habit of, when you set up to the ball, look a little bit left of where you originally think, and then once you get with it, and once you get comfortable with it, you'll start looking at that way, and then you'll feel like, oh, and inevitably you'll probably start swinging better because your eye line, your body, all your alignment, and just overall, brain to execution will all work in a much more succinct way. Plus, you're setting up to the ball like a freaking boss. So here comes, low scores of your career. So that's the first thing that we want to start with, is setup. Practice setup. Do it anywhere you can. You don't need a club. Natural, organic, athletic, neutral, loose. And then the pro tip is, when you set up to the ball, look a little bit left of where you would think. Thanks for tuning in. See you next week.